everybody, Composer Gloves here, and this is the second video in the Harmor from the Ground Up tutorial series. And today we are going to conquer the timbre section. So first we're going to go to a default patch, and in order to do that, you just right click up here, you go to default. If you have a crazy big, like huge display of presets, you can go to tree display and it'll look a little more like mine. It'll display it in the file tree that you have available. Or you go over here, click down, go to presets, and then the same crazy thing will display. Or you can just, again, click on tree display, and then bang, it'll show up in this nice little thing you can use. So anyways, so now you should have a patch that sounds like that. And you have a spectral display. It displays our spectrum. Here's the bottom frequency. It goes up in harmonics. So these are the partials, and you got to keep in mind that this is an additive synthesis process. And so each one of these partials phase is calculated independently, its pitch and its amplitude, its volume. And so you can change how big this is. Click it once and it's, just a little one. Click it twice, it's much bigger, and then click it again to close it. So when you have these two octave and hertz modes, we're going to talk about these modes as we move on. So this is the timbre section, even though it looks like it's like timbre, it's timbre. Timbre, and the reason it's called timbre is because the spectrum. So a timbre is basically an instrument's overtone setup. So what makes a clarinet sound like a clarinet? Because you could have two notes like a saxophone and a clarinet play the same fundamental tone. They could both have the same fundamental tone, but the overtone structure is extraordinarily different, and so that's called timbre. So what we're messing with here is our waveform. However, we know that our waveform is simply a whole bunch of harmonics stacked on top of each other in a particular way. And so it's messing with the timbre of the waveform. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, these are some pretty cool options. You can actually drop custom waveforms in there. What does that mean? Well, if we open up an Edison, I happen to have one open, and we zoom in real close on a piece of audio, we will notice that a waveform is present, and from this waveform we can derive a timbre. So if we were to take one cycle of this and drop it on to our timbre section, it will analyze our file and use that data as the data for the timbre or the oscillator. So if we grab this and drop it on there, you see that things just changed. And we'll also see that our timbre harmonic level envelope is open now, and things are very different. There are all sorts of weird phase things because this happens to be my voice, but you can't really hear it. But yeah, so when you drop it, you could drop entire audio files on there, but it'll only take one sample of the waveform, and I believe it takes it from the beginning of the clip, so you may have silence. So you may want to be more specific and grab things directly. Now, because we're looking at data like this, this second one is dependent on this first one. They have this relationship going on. So we're going to go back to, so that's just another cool thing you could do. We're not going to look at the harmonic mappings yet, the envelopes and stuff, because they're a little more advanced, and we're going to move into envelopes a little bit later. I'll probably have just an envelope video introducing it, and then I'll bring it up more often. But right click, go back to default. So we're back in default, and our harmonic mappings are great. So there's a few things you should know. First off, watch my DSP series. It has a lot of information about this. It's really necessary. But a saw wave has a specific overtone series, and it happens to be this. And there's this is the fundamental tone, so it's the lowest tone, and then this is an octave, and then this is like an octave plus a fifth or a third or something, and it goes up onto forever in this fashion, and it creates what we know as a saw wave. A square wave is every other one of those harmonics. So you see, it just took out half of the harmonics, just cut them up. So we're going to talk about phase now. Now, if you don't know what phase is, it's really important that you understand. So if I open up a massive, here we have massive, and here's our waveform. It's a sine wave. Ignore this bottom one, doesn't matter. So where it starts is the phase of the waveform. So if you move it over a little, we just changed where it starts. We changed the phase. And you continue to do so, and it continuously changes the phase. So if we come into our phase section, it should be noted that the phase, this second timbre data set you could put in, takes the phase information from the first according to the phase knobs. So these phase knobs affect this, which affects this. Okay, so first you could change the starting point of the waveform, just like what I was doing just with the LFO and massive. You could just change it by just moving the start knob. And this could be really important. This could become really dicey. As we get into more sound design, you'll see it be used more. So you come over here to random. Now there are two ways to do this. So what this random is referring to, if we turn it to the right, it does pretty much randomizing the starting. So it's like we change this every time we press a new note. But if we go to the left, it randomizes each partial individually. And so you get sort of a mess. As you can see, that's what happens when you change the phase of everything randomly. And you could change the amount that this happens. And this could be really useful for creating textures, tones, especially on very short attack type things. So there's that. So we've already talked about the waveform, how to load a waveform, what that does. You have this mix mode, and you can mix between this waveform and that waveform, but it's according to the mode that you set. And so we're going to briefly cover that. So right now, if we do our mix, we'll get, right now we have a mix of a square and a saw wave. And you can see that every other harmonic's actually emphasized. It's created resonance. And if we turn it over, it'll lose its emphasis, and then all the way over is just the square wave. It's gone. That's because we're on the fade option. If we go to subtract, it'll subtract. The second one will subtract itself from the first one. So we still have a square wave, but now it looks different because we've gone about it a different way. Because remember, this is additive synthesis. The first one will multiply by the other one. Now, I don't totally understand the multiply one, so we're just going to leave it at that. But you see, we get quite a a grittier texture because I've reduced myself to buzzwords from lack of knowledge. But it multiplies. I don't know what that implies. How it's multiplying the sum of the frequency. I don't know. I don't know enough math to talk about this. And then we have maximum, which I believe it'll take the maximum number of partials available. So there's no change. It'll always take the maximum because this is less than this. And so as a result, turning it over. So right now it's taking the maximum from here, but over here it's borrowing, remember? So that's my ideas on that one. May or may not be right. And same minimum will take the least amount available. So you see we've got our square wave back. Now in the manual, they said tell them if you figure out what pluck does. And I believe, ironically, I can't explain the other ones, but I believe I figured it out. So this has reference to the pluck setting. I haven't covered it yet, and I'm not going to cover it right now. But if you turn it on and we hit some notes, we'll notice that it plucks just like we would expect it to. But we have our square wave, because this was originally a square wave as the default value. But we have these middle textures, these middle ones. The saw wave series is still in our waveform. So what the heck's the deal with that? Well, if we turn our pluck up a little bit to make it a bit more apparent. So here it's obviously plucking the square, but our saw wave's still in there. And as we morph back to the square, I got my square and saw all mixed up. If we morph back from the square to the saw timbre, we'll see these harmonics get drawn out. So it's reintroducing our saw wave back into it. So this will just add emphasis on the pluck. I think the idea is to give, even though apparently the developers forgot. I know the feeling of like making a cool idea and then forgetting what it did because you didn't like label it or something. But now we're back to just plucking our saw wave. But this, I think, is to just give more initial attack to your sound. That would be my guess. And as we move it over, you see it changes. Now, to prove my point, to prove that these things aren't supposed to be, or if we go to fade, they disappear. They're gone. Now it's just a square wave. Same with subtract. Now multiply and maximum. Now maximum, we've talked about maximum, minimum, but that's what pluck does. And so, I don't know, pretty happy I discovered what it did. When I saw that in the manual, I was pretty sure I wouldn't figure it out, but I did. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Subscribe because you're a beautiful person and you deserve beautiful things, and that's what I strive to make. And have a blessed day.